Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell, Community Engagement Lead at Pathify. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a proud member of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow every day. Explore all of our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm very excited and honored to have our guest today, a fellow podcaster on the Enrollify Podcast Network. You will see more of these coming out in the feed with this new season this year, just to help introduce all the awesome people I've just been observing over the past several months since joining the network myself. Some of the folks who have been on there preceding me or came on after. There's a lot of great folks. So excited to have this opportunity to get to know them for myself, but then also help our audience know about all the other awesome people and shows and stuff on the Enrollify Podcast Network. But we will start as we always do. Jamie, if you want to do a brief introduction of yourself, like I feel like you're very well known in all this sort of higher ed marketing circles and everything. But I've started to get to know you just sort of kind of seeing your work and listening to episodes of your show and everything. So if you want to kind of give like the elevator pitch, I guess, of just sort of introducing yourself, and then we'll kind of dig in with everything else.
Yeah, so I am a higher ed CMO who's been working in higher ed. This is my 20th year, and I am passionate about leading with empathy and building really innovative marketing communications teams. And I have been at, I think, 6 institutions in the last 20 years, which is sort of mind-blowing to me. But currently, I'm at Old Dominion University, where I am the CMO and Vice President for University Communications.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you helped for me, especially somebody from kind of the outside looking in, not in sort of the formal like higher ed marketing circles, like that idea of like chief marketing officer, kind of hoisting that title and mantle up and sort of examining that, or sort of, and we'll talk about your show in a bit here, but just the idea of like confessions of, that empathy, that sort of personality and humanity of all this kind of stuff. It's, it's good that that's sort of like guiding your work in all things and sort of shows up in the podcast as well. But, as of the recording of this, we're recording this early December 2023. I know recently, and I was very envious and jealous I couldn't be there, but the AMA, the American Marketing Association, Marketing of Higher Education conference, I know it's a big deal in these circles and everything. And as somebody who I would hope to maybe go next year, just because I feel like it seems like it's an amazing time, a lot of great people there. Any reflections that you want to share, just of sort of what that experience was like, since that was so recent?
Yeah, I am such a fan of AMA, and have to give a little disclaimer. I'm on the planning committee for the symposium, so I'm like probably contractually obligated to love it, but I do actually love it, and it feels a little bit like you're with your people, right? Like it's people with the same challenges as you, and it's a conference for people across the spectrum. From this is your first year out of college, and you're in an entry-level role, all the way up to you're a veteran of the industry. You've been in higher ed for a long time. And with about 1,400 attendees, you're going to find people who are in similar boats that you're in. Schools of all sizes and types. We're really trying to make sure that we're engaging all the different types of schools. So community colleges, HBCUs, everything, getting everybody involved. But for me, the takeaway from the event in November, aside from the sprained ankle that I got while I was presenting, is that there is so much interest in AI right now. Every round table was packed. Every session that talked about AI was packed. It was like people are so hungry for knowledge and insights into how to use AI. And right now, I still think we're kind of at the ground floor. If you're diving in now, I think you're still getting in its infancy, and can hopefully learn and adapt and grow as the tools evolve. It's not too late to get interested in it, but it was very evident to me that higher ed marketers are seeing the opportunity here and taking it really seriously. The other thing I would say as a takeaway, I was part of the senior leadership experience, and that is that there's a very big realization among higher ed CMOs in particular that these are really vulnerable jobs, and that a lot of times when our schools might be struggling with issues, the finger ends up being pointed back at marketing or branding as somehow failing the institution. And then, the CMO gets ousted after, 2 years or something. And it's so disruptive to the institution to have this change in strategy around brand every couple of years. And you really can't expect a marketing leader to be able to be effective in that short window of time. And then they're sort of gone. And so that was something I heard a lot from my colleagues. I have a lot of colleagues who are very concerned about their jobs right now and are really strongly feeling the pressure. And this isn't really a fun and lighthearted topic to talk about, but that was something I feel like if you're working in higher ed marketing, you need to be aware of. And even if you don't, if you work in other parts of higher ed, to be aware of the pressures that are on your marketing office and how in a lot of ways they hold the weight of the success of your institutions, good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it is important, and that's sort of like that. I'm trying to think of the right word, but that sort of like call to action around that sort of like the idea of like what this role actually is. And certainly like there's, I'm sure there's more than enough opportunities of people showcasing like the positive impact and sort of celebrating that. And there's sort of a lot of positive energy, but it's like, because there's sort of this high level of potential and impact, like there's a lot of, you could have the other side, like a lot of expectations or accountability or sort of, responsibility and all that. So I think it is interesting, but good that was acknowledged, and you're trying to kind of marry those two things to really account for that sort of that environment, that culture that you're going to be going into, so that you can not almost like hamstring yourself because you're too reticent or something or whatever. Because I think that's kind of like the it's like a very unfortunate recipe that like, yeah, you only know the other side where it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a like, kind of like toxic culture where people are like ousted here and that. And it's like, no, it's not that extreme. Like there is
Right.
this, let's like talk about it. And then let's talk about how, yeah, we could leverage something like AI to reach greater heights and sort of, put you in a position where, yeah, you're achieving the goals of the institution and doing it in a, responsible, sustainable way and everything. So, and yeah, I mean, I think too, just I was wondering if you're going to bring it up or not, but just that idea of like you were sharing some like videos each day, kind of recapping stuff, which I really appreciate. So I try to do that as much as I can when I go to conferences as well, and mentioning even the humanity, the vulnerability of like sprained my ankle, you guys, like that was the thing that happened. Because I think it's like that idea of like conferences, especially if you're a speaker, it's like, well, I'm up on the stage and doing all these things, and it's like things happen still and it's fine.
Yes.
Life goes on, and it's kind of, acknowledge it and all that. And I think just that nature that I guess you feel like AMA, and certainly I guess you have a better vantage point on this. And then if it's just like going, we're like, oh, I don't know, I had fun. It was cool, whatever. Like, that it like the event was a success and kind of why, like what the sort of ingredients were there, but like that it can feel like an environment that I guess is like very comprehensive, very intentional and all that. Cause I think like just some events steer more one way or the other. So like, it's good to know that, sort of achieving that balance and perspective of the field at this moment. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think we did a really nice job of bringing in speakers from all types of schools too. We had a lot of proposal submissions, I think over 300, somewhere in that range. And there was a lot of intentionality about making sure that we had content that spanned the entire career life cycle. So like I said, from if you're, a baby higher ed marketer just cutting their teeth on it to, the grizzled old veteran or whatever, and everything in between. And that's what I think I like most about this conference compared to some others where it kind of feels like, oh, there's like 3 sessions on this one topic, but nothing at all on this other really important topic. It's a great conference. That said, there's a lot of great professional learning opportunities out there. If you can't afford to go or whatever, there's lots of other opportunities out there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out a good rhythm of like, what are the ones that are like my professional home? I got to go every year. I can sort of rely on that. And how do I kind of keep a diverse diet of like, okay, that was cool. I don't know if I need to go every year, but I'm going to try to like keep an eye on it. Maybe if it's closer, the time of
Mhm.
year or whatever, that'll help kind of determine or, anything like that. But, Yeah, but want to make space for that because I know actually, I mean, like I feel like a lot of people on the Unrelified Podcast Network are involved with that. So it's just like, hey,
Yeah.
you were the first one, and it just last month. So let's see what you know what you had to say about it. Uh, but yeah, I know you've been in the podcasting game now and found you know certainly what you're doing is definitely resonating a lot. You know, just that idea of bringing that kind of humanity and kind of introspection into marketing, whether it is like even bringing in just like the people who work with CMOs and sort of just that kind of environmental kind of ecosystem that CMOs are existing in and examining that. But we'll start at the beginning. What inspired you to get into podcasting? I feel like it's something that a lot of people are like curious about or interested in or dabble in, but then just sort of bail out. But like, what inspired you to get started with in the first place?
So I'm going to age myself pretty drastically here, but in 2006, I actually proposed a podcast at the institution that I worked at and drafted all the scripts, got the talent, recorded them all. We were with like a little recorder in a closet with like a bunch of blankets around us, recording, and then I edited them all and posted them and shared them. So I've been super interested in podcasting since like it was invented, really. And I've always loved radio, all of that, which is similar. But I wanted to have a higher ed podcast. And I was toying with this idea in January of, I guess, 22 now. And out of the blue, Zach Boozacruz called me and said that he had heard my name sort of bandied about as a potential podcast host. And I just loved what he was trying to build with the Enrollify Network and loved the support that I would have. I wouldn't have to edit it myself. They would help promote it and get it in front of people. And so for me, that was a win-win, getting it out there without having to do all of that stuff myself, while also still having the creative freedom to do what I want with the podcast. And Zach was really, really collaborative with it. But what I wanted to do was kind of have a podcast that could be like a mini conference session with every episode. When you're talking to somebody who's doing a deep dive into what they're doing at their institution on a single topic that really brings to life something that maybe I haven't seen at a conference yet, or is something that's been talked about at a conference, but maybe at a different level or in a different way. But to bring that content to folks, and also make sure that I'm infusing in that leading with empathy piece, because I think that that is something that's so critical for us as marketers. We need to have empathy to be able to see things from somebody else's perspective in order to be effective marketers. But then beyond that, I think for those of us who do have what I consider a privilege of leading people, leading with empathy, I think is the best and only way to effectively lead people. And so if what I can do can inspire people a little bit to explore that, I think that's feeds my heart a lot, because I think that if we're empowering our people and helping our people maximize their talents and abilities, we're just going to get such better work. If you need to have that business case for it. Personally, I think leading with empathy means you get to keep your humanity and be the wonderful person that you are. But if you need the business case, I think the productivity and the outcomes are stronger when you lead with empathy. So I'm trying to weave both learning more about marketing things with being a more empathetic person and hope that it inspires people.
Amazing that you were like being like, yeah, let's do this. Like back in 2006 of starting a podcast, because it's like it was absolutely not as easy as it is today. And like I knew sort of like kind of how the sausage is made back in like because it's going to be almost 10 years since I started my first one. So back in 2014, just like you know I don't know, doing like backdoor things with like Skype and whatever to do like
Yes.
virtual interviews or whatever. But so yeah, and I mean, and I think that's like it does seem like the people who are successful have some sort of germ of like, oh, I like it's like for me, it's like even before starting my first one was like doing like radio TV stuff in high school and all that. So just that like comfort with like capturing content and then editing it and then like putting it in front of people and all that, like that I feel like helps people be more successful. Not saying that that is like a required, sort of skill set or experience, or whatever, but that certainly helps, because I think there's like those initial hurdles and stuff. And I like to kind of your uh, almost like not restricting yourself by like the premise or something, because that would be another way where people would just sort of like, burn out or fizzle out, where it's just like, nope, if it's like confessions of a CMO, like that's sort of like who we're talking to. It's only CMOs. We're only going to do that. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's great for like consistency. But like, I would think at a point, it would be hard to get like a lot of different perspectives, and because it's like, hey, I mean, there's only so many like institutions or
Right.
CMOs or whatever, or like I don't know, but like so like I think that sort of like that core and that heart, and that you are sort of like letting that kind of start to ripple out of like, okay, what does it mean to be a CMO from your perspective, that like leading with empathy, and that that is part of it, in the sense of like, it's not just managing, it is leading, which can entail just sort of like who you are, what you're about, how you're sort of navigating in the world, how you work with other people, how you do manage people like that report to you. But so I feel like, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, cool, now we've expanded the sandbox here, there's going to be a lot more room. And yeah, that idea of like every episode being, because it's like, I guess the how it would equate is, the fireside chats or something. It's like, hey, it's just me and one other person, or maybe two, whatever. It may be more of like a panel, but sort of focus on the relevancy for people's everyday working lives and everything. Like I aspire towards sort of a similar thing. It's like we could do that with, humanity, with fun, with sort of some levity or whatever
Hmm.
else. But that's a very compelling vision. It's cool to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of like how you sort of navigate the creating the episodes. And yeah, you've been doing it. It launched April 2022, so it's over 1.5 years. That's much longer than many other podcasts, get the luxury
Yeah.
of existing, everything. So if you want to kind of take this, we can break it apart. If you want to start one area or the other, like, but what have you learned personally, professionally from this journey so far, of doing episodes over this year and a half?
Yeah. So I just recorded episode 44, and I have learned from 44 amazing people. It's a secret way of getting professional development myself too, because I'm talking to people about an area where they have a ton of expertise, and that has been fascinating. And I think that one of the things I've learned ties back to the listenership. So I'm humbled by what the listenership is. I mean, it's a very popular podcast. I am trying to be like Barbie and just own that, right? Like it's a very popular podcast. But I think a piece of that is because um, I am my authentic self in the podcast, and I try to bring out the authentic selves of my guests on the podcast. And I think that people want that authenticity. I think people crave it, particularly now in a world where there's so much that's artificial and fake and phony. To have people who are actually connecting as two human beings, I think is something people resonate with a lot. And that informs me as a marketer too, because it makes me think about how we reach our prospective students, and that they're looking for that same authenticity, and what can that look like, and how can I be, as a leader, helping my teams bring in their authentic selves and bring that authenticity. So I think it's been just a really stark lesson in, if I'm myself, if I own who I am, that resonates with people more than when I'm trying to be something I'm not. When I started as a leader, I've been a higher ed CMO for 8.5 years now. And when I started, I thought I had to be hard. Thought I had to be tough. I thought I had to put this mantle on me that wasn't authentic to who I am. And over the course of the last 8.5 years, learning from some great and wonderful people, but also through this podcast experience, I've learned that instead, be the person that I am, and um, be a person with humanity and with empathy that leads from a place of compassion. And that doesn't mean there's no accountability, but that those things will make you much more comfortable. And when you're comfortable, when you're confident, when you're authentic to yourself, that's when success comes along. That's when things start to really pop for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that like you could like sort of learn the same thing in both areas. There's the idea of like authenticity and the power of that, and how to sort of like, uh, I mean, walk that tightrope. Because I think there's a version with what you were saying, especially just like the position you're in, and certainly maybe the people that you're talking about, and that you're like, you're getting a lot of positive reception to it, that like ego just takes over. Like it's just becomes this sort of like vanity project. And I think anybody who knows like podcasting as a world, it's like that is a major driver of a lot of podcasts out there, is people just wanting like this, platform that they can create and manage and do whatever they want with, to just like get all the attention that they think that they deserve, and the kind of attention, and present themselves in a way that's like, super polished or whatever. And it's not to say that it's like, any podcast like, oh, you shouldn't edit it, should be just like completely raw. It's like, no, like we're going to edit it so that we showcase like what the person is saying, and make it as clear and concise and compelling as possible. But it's like, they said what they said, they said it how they say it. Like you can only edit so much and all that. And even just that idea of like, you're doing a show that is interviewing other people, and that sort of like empathy and all these words that sort of keep kind of ringing in the episode. It's like, sort of, it is such a good practice. Like you said, even just like, if nothing else, it's like, I know that I was like, hey, nobody listens, I learned from it. But then it's like,
Right.
even just the activity of doing it, it's like, you need to find that balance of like, okay, I want to put my fingerprints on this, but I need to make the space for somebody, make them feel sort of heard and validated and all that. Like, it's been such a good exercise for me in that. And like, I was telling somebody where it's like, identifying as an introvert. And I'd actually say probably a lot of podcasters probably do like identify that way, because like just the nature of this medium. But like, I feel like I've gone to the gym of podcasting for almost 10 years. And the idea of like having good conversations with people, being very curious and all that, like that's such a big takeaway, I feel like, and why I enjoy doing this even after all this time and can't ever see stopping. Is it like, well, Debbie, do you ever stop going to the gym? You just gotta keep doing it. And you maybe kind of like,
Right.
change your routine or whatever, like, so yeah, I feel like it's such a positive thing. And there's other ways to achieve it, I guess, to carry that metaphor forward. The idea of like, it's like, okay, well, just go out to more networking events, or like go to or whatever. Just that idea of like exposing yourself to new things and all that. And you don't have to even necessarily be the person that's like moderating or doing any of those sort of things. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there's such profound sort of, impacts for a person that kind of goes on this journey, sticks with it, and goes with sort of the ups and downs of like, even just like technical hiccups, or just sort of like, maybe, I didn't really, do that episode the best I could. What was it about it that I didn't, didn't sit right, and kind of learn and grow from that as well. So
For sure.
always a strong advocate of like the medium and everything.
I love it. And my husband I record in his office, which is on the third floor of our house. And he will usually be like playing video games on the first floor. And I'll come down after recording and he'll be like, I heard a lot of laughing. So it must have been a good episode, because we try to have fun. Right. And I think if you listen to my episodes, the confessions over the course of the 44 I've recorded so far are increasingly real. Like they're increasingly like, yeah, I was a total jerk to my project manager back in 2010. That's my confession. And I'm really sorry. Let's talk about project management. I'm getting a lot more like, okay, I'm just going to say it like it is. Because I remember one time I posted something, and I don't even remember what it was on Twitter, but I had somebody who was earlier career, maybe like 5 to 7 years in the business, reach out to me and say, I love that you're just like your weird self, because it makes me think there isn't like some sort of magic person who's born to be a vice president or a chief marketing officer, that it's something I can aspire to, even though I'm weird. And so I try to be my weird self. I'm trying to be open about the fact that I do live with a disability, that I am a queer woman, because I think that those are not things that exclude you from being able to have the career that you want. But I think that if you shove those things down and hide them from people, that's when you start to have the problem, because you're not your authentic self. You're not living your truth. And people get a sense of that. And I think just unconsciously, they're less likely to like embrace you and move you forward. So that's, I kind of feel like I'm loosening up even more with every episode I record for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible, because I think that's the idea too of authenticity, is not just sort of like fire hosing, everything on. It's like, no, you can kind of like slow trip it. And especially like the idea that somebody would say like, oh, I can't really just let everybody in on all my stuff all at once. It's like, well, you don't have to. You can kind of like
Right.
build up on it and just sort of
Right.
like, share it as it's sort of like organically relevant. And certainly I think, yeah, like my ability to kind of bring sort of a like my authentic sort of levity and just sort of lightheartedness is probably my biggest thing. And I kind of like put little breadcrumbs of like, I'm sure if somebody's listened to between both shows over 10 years, just an idea of like, oh yeah, he moved and he got a dog and he, had a kid and got married. What, so like just those little like anecdotes, but like all of those things like definitely inform the way that I view, uh, the topics that I'm talking about and how I talk about them and, all that. Cause I think, I guess that's even the thing, just I just thought of this. It's like I have not listened to episodes from a long time ago. Maybe I should do that and do some sort of like React content or something. But that idea of like I probably had some like not so great episodes or sort of like dumb takes or something, especially like in hindsight or something. I don't know, but just that it's like knowing like that's maybe like an idea of authenticity. What I'm sort of getting at here is that, like knowing that you will hopefully, I guess, sort of like look back and be like, wow, yeah, like I wasn't maybe being fully, authentic in the sense of like I was guarding things and just sort of like kind of picking and choosing how I kind of talked about myself or whatever. And then even just the idea of being more informed, where it's just like, oh, I didn't even have, as much of an idea now about, leading with empathy. But then it's like 44 episodes later, it's like, oh man, I've totally upgraded. And now feel so much more confident. But looking back, it's almost just like I'm cringing of being like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't really know what I was talking about back then. I thought I did. But your episode 44, I guess for now, as we sort of, certainly if people have kept up with the headlines, like the network is going through some transition. But, for now, I think we're all expecting all the shows kind of moving forward as they were and kind of keeping all the awesome content flowing. So as of now, as you're sort of, looking ahead at the year to come, 2024, any content teases, any things that you're hoping to address or people that you're hoping to talk to that you can kind of tease people with?
I'm trying to make sure that I hit on all the areas of that fall under the diversity, equity, inclusion banner. So we've talked already about race and ethnicity. I have an upcoming episode that's going to talk about reaching the LGBTQIA plus community. We've talked about disability. I want to dig into that a little bit more. I'm looking at talking to some folks that are doing interesting things with their roles that are beyond marketing. So, folks who have maybe marketing and IT report to them, or maybe they're chief experience officers. So they have some of those other elements in it. I anticipate touching on AI, continuing to touch on that. The challenge with talking about AI is I usually am recording about a month and a half out, and everything's going to be different in a month and a half. So that one's a little bit more challenging topic. User experience, more stuff around that topic. Building cultures, building teams that have strong collaborative cultures. Lots and lots of stuff in the hopper. I never am short on ideas. My biggest challenge is honestly just getting them scheduled with people not too far out. Like if I say to somebody today, right now it's December, if I say like, oh my gosh, I want to interview you, my next availability is in 3 weeks, but it's not going to air until April. People don't love that. So I've been kind of doing, maybe 4 episodes out and then saying like, okay, now I'm ready to schedule with you so that they're not like, what do you mean April? But lots of good stuff, on the horizon.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I love that, like just for kudos to you and to other folks on the network. Like, I mean, we have a whole show now. I want to work there of just sort of that like team culture, recruitment, staffing, and everything. Like, that's just sort of an idea of like, well, we could talk a big game about all these sort of like, marketing should do this or that or use these tools and everything. But it's just like, you have to have actually people to do that. Like, how do you sort of,
Yes.
that is, I just have a personal interest in that. So I'm glad that there's just more of a light being shown on that. Because I think so much gets talked about sort of, like the tools like AI or something, or people could say like, oh man, social media, what's going on with that? And it's like, yeah, but then there's like the people that have to like oversee it and to manage it and all that. And how do we sort of like train those people, develop those people, recruit those people, create succession plans or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like there's like a lot of cool. I just like that kind of aspect of the work as much as the other stuff, and hoping that like that, there's sort of room at the table for all those sort of topics. And then certainly, yeah, I mean, there's so many things. And again, I'm just to kind of reinforce the point, glad that you keep a very open mind as to the sort of like topics and stuff that you talk about, because it all just is sort of, but hopefully kind of gets blended together to inform the perspectives of, your colleagues across the country. So we will end, though, as we always do, final thought, call to action on this topic. We've kind of just focused on your journey through podcasting and what that sort of, how that sort of informed your work and everything. But just, final thought, call to action. The floor is yours.
As I end every episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, just go out into the world and bust as many silos as you can. Like, let's just go tear those down piece by piece. And you can do it from wherever you sit. You don't have to be the CMO.
An important reminder always, I feel like. It's like we always just need to, slap that on our walls or something, just to see it every day. Because, that's the idea that, like, you could do all the things that we're talking about, but it's just going to hamstring you moving forward if you're kind of like doing it in isolation and all that. So good words to live by, good reminder for folks. And we'll certainly, as always, have ways to connect with you, Confessions of CMO, and everything else in the show notes and description for this episode. But thanks so much for hanging out.
Thank you. I was honored to come on the show.
Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jaime Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.